In the heart of the Archelian Empire, among the swirling gas giants and jeweled moons of the sector of 10 suns, stood the capital world of Lizurna, a planet of floating cities and skyborne spires. At the center of it all rose the celestial spire, a monolith of pure crystal that shimmered in a spectrum of colors depending on the position of the twin suns. It was here that Princess Virelia presided, high above her empire, aloof and untouchable. She was known as the Starborn Flame, revered across the galaxy not only for her breathtaking appearance, skin like liquid pearl, eyes that mirrored dying stars, but for her unparalleled intelligence, diplomacy, and power. She spoke 20 galactic languages, commanded her own fleet by age 16, and single-handedly resolved 3 interstellar conflicts with nothing but words. And yet, for all her brilliance, Virelia was a mystery, not just to her subjects, but to the galaxy's most powerful leaders who had tried and failed to win her heart. She had rejected exactly 1,000 suitors. From every corner of the known galaxy, they had come. Emissaries, warriors, kings, bio-augmented supergenerals, sentient eyes in humanoid shells, shapeshifters from the mist realms, and even a time-displaced monarch who claimed to be from the future. Some offered rare technologies, others entire moons. One gifted her the tears of a dying star, bottled in neutron crystal. Each one expected to be chosen. Each one failed. The rejections were never cruel, but always absolute. Virelia would simply tilt her head, raise one brow, and in a calm, crystalline voice say, "No." Speculation abounded. Was she incapable of love? Was it a political game? Was she stalling until the Empire solidified its control over the outer orbits? Many believed she simply saw no one as her equal. They weren't entirely wrong. Virelia had been raised among wolves. Every interaction, even from childhood, had been laced with hidden agendas. Her tutors taught her to see motivations behind every smile, every offer. In time, her heart grew guarded. What others saw as arrogance was, in truth, exhaustion. A woman who had spent her entire life being wanted, but never understood. Her advisors, the Senate, and the elders of the throne began to grow concerned. An unmarried ruler, especially a woman of such high profile, risked instability. Alliances were stalling. Some began whispering that she should be replaced, but Virelia didn't care. "Will not bind myself to one who desires my crown more than my company," she said to her council. "I seek no throne sharer, only someone who would stand beside me, whether I were princess or peasant." They dismissed her words as romantic nonsense. The next suitor, a 4-armed noble from the War Moon Crix, was being announced when Aden. Everything changed. He didn't arrive in a fleet. There were no drums, no gifts, no ceremonial escorts. The guard stopped him at the outer city gates, a human male, in worn boots and a dusty jacket, carrying a simple travel bag and a mischievous grin. "I'm here to see the princess," he said. The guards exchanged looks. "State your designation, house, and diplomatic intent." "I'm not from a house," the human replied, glancing around. "And my intent? Just curiosity." "They say she's impossible to impress." "And you think you can?" One guard sneered. He chuckled. "I think I don't need to." "Curious." Murmurs followed him as he walked, undeterred, toward the spire. Royal protocol dictated he be turned away immediately. Yet by some strange turn, whether whimsy, fate, or something else entirely, the royal steward allowed him in. That evening, Virelia stood in the receiving chamber, watching the latest suitor step forward. She prepared herself for another pompous fool. Instead, a human in civilian clothes looked her dead in the eye and said, "You look bored." The chamber fell silent. "I've come," he continued, "not to bow, not to win, not to dazzle. Just to talk." Her advisors gaped. The guards reached for their weapons. Varelia raised her hand. Let him speak. He offered a half grin. You've rejected 1,000 suitors. Maybe it's because they were all trying to own something that can't be owned. She studied him. Slowly, her lips curved. Perhaps, she said, you're not entirely a fool. In that moment, something subtle shifted like gravity, bending ever so slightly. Not love, not desire, but curiosity. The human called himself Elias Rook. No lineage, no political agenda, no armored convoy waiting in orbit. Just a man who arrived uninvited and somehow remained. The palace expected him to be escorted out the same night. He wasn't. Princess Varelia, against the recommendation of every advisor she had, allowed him to stay not as a guest of state, not even in the noble quarters, but in the workers' wing. The same halls where gardeners, engineers, and maintenance droids recharged. He accepted without complaint. It didn't take long for whispers to flood the marble corridors. The princess had never shown interest in any suitor, not even the ones who'd brought living sons or written songs that spanned the electromagnetic spectrum. But this human, who fixed a broken courtyard lamp with nothing but wire and instinct, somehow earned her attention. He didn't ask for an audience, yet she gave him one. He didn't ask for her favor, yet she seemed to offer it without realizing. Varelia, it was like watching a glitch in the universe. Elias didn't flinch at the grandeur of the palace, nor did he treat her with the smothering reverence she'd grown used to. When given royal wine, he raised a brow and asked for something less fermented. When shown the grand starlight archives, he nodded appreciatively, then asked where the real people went to read. He didn't seem to care about impressing her at all. And that, strangely, impressed her more than anything. Why are you really here? She asked during their first private walk and informal stroll through the echoing sky bridges, where artificial stars blinked overhead and gravity kept them lightly suspended. Elias gave her a look that was equal parts amused and thoughtful. The galaxy's been buzzing about this perfect princess who rejects everyone. Got curious. Curious? She echoed, narrowing her eyes. You risked planetary rejection for curiosity? He shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time I've been kicked off a world. That earned a rare laugh from her soft, genuine, unpolished. It startled even her own guards. I've met 1,000 suitors, she said. All of them came with goals, treaties, legacies. You bring nothing. Exactly, Elias replied. Which means I don't want anything from you. I'm just here. No crown hunting, no power games. Maybe that's why you're talking to me. Varelia didn't reply immediately. She was watching him closely now, weighing every word. Not for lies, he had none, but for something else. Something she'd long stopped hoping for. Authenticity. The next days blurred into something unfamiliar. She found herself seeking him out, not as a ruler, but as a woman curious and oddly unguarded. She visited the workshop where he volunteered his time, repairing drones and teaching palace engineers a Terran trick involving a rubber band. And spit. She watched him play chess with a 9-armed oracle child in the lower courts. She caught him teaching her own soldiers a form of unarmed combat he called dirty boxing. When she asked why he called it that, he said, because in a real fight, etiquette loses. When they walked together again, this time through the gardens, floating above the capital, she looked at him with narrowed curiosity. You know this is causing an uproar, he smirked. Let them uproar. They say you're trying to seduce me through humility. I'm not trying to seduce you, he said honestly. That'd be like trying to tame a comet. I just like talking to you. She stopped walking, turned to face him. That's new. What is? You're not trying to fix me, win me, or break me. I wouldn't dare, Elias said, holding her gaze. You're not a riddle to solve. You're a person. One that happens to glow a little brighter than the rest. Varelia's heart, long armored in protocol and expectation, gave a strange, disobedient lurch. Later that night, alone in her quarters, she stared into her reflection, flawless, composed, regal. But for once, she didn't feel like a monarch. She felt like a woman wondering if maybe, just maybe, someone saw past the light show. She summoned him the next day. "Walk with me," she said. "Again?" He teased. "At this rate, people will start talking." "Let them," she replied, echoing his earlier words. As they moved through the skywalks, their shoulders brushed, barely noticeable. But that small contact, casual yet unforced, sent a quiet thrill through them both. And though neither of them said anything at the time, they both knew this wasn't a game anymore. Something real had begun. By the time word of Princess Virelia's continued association with the human spread to the outer systems, the galactic nobility was already in an uproar. This wasn't a passing curiosity anymore. She had allowed Elias Rook to remain by her side longer than any suitor in memory. And worse, she wasn't just tolerating him, she was smiling, laughing, asking his opinion during court briefings. For centuries, the Archelian Empire had been a pillar of decorum and dynastic pride. Marriages were arranged for political gain, alliances forged by bloodlines thicker than planetary rings. Virelia's open defiance of this ancient tradition wasn't just scandalous, it was dangerous. In the Court of Nine Houses, noble delegates raised objections, accusing her of corruption. The High Oracle of the Sapphire Spire even claimed she was under psychic manipulation. One noble went so far as to call Elias a parasite that has attached itself to the throne. Yet when confronted, Virelia remained calm. "Elias is not manipulating me," she said in a public address. "And he is not courting me for position or power. He is here because I invited him." That statement alone sent ripples through the empire. Meanwhile, Elias refused to change. He didn't wear court robes or try to act like someone he wasn't. He still spoke plainly, cracked jokes in front of council members, and showed no interest in claiming any political role. He remained Elias, the Terran wanderer with grease on his sleeves and ideas that made the old guard sweat. This refusal to play the game made him more dangerous than any suitor before. One day, as they walked through the archives of living memory crystalline, trees containing echoes of past rulers, Virelia turned to him. "You know what they say about you now?" she asked. "I stopped keeping track," he replied. "But I bet it's creative." She offered a wry smile. "They say you've cast a spell on me," Elias shrugged. "I mean, I'm decent at chess and better than most at repairing broken irrigation systems, if that counts as magic." She laughed again, a real, unscripted laugh that echoed through the chamber. She hadn't laughed like that in public in years, but the political consequences soon followed. 3 noble houses issued formal protests. One renounced its loyalty to the throne. Several minor systems began forming a separatist bloc, claiming the princess's reckless romantic indulgence proved she was unfit to lead. And then came the assassination attempts. The first was a subtle attempt at poison engineered to mimic a Terran virus placed in a drink Elias never consumed. The second was not. A rogue mech guard, hacked remotely, attacked him in the palace armory. He survived, barely, thanks to his combat instincts and the intervention of Virelia's personal shield. That incident changed her. She stood before the Council of Stars with cold fire in her voice. "You would harm a guest of the palace, a man under my protection, simply because he is not one of you? Let this be clear. My throne is not yours to dictate." The councilors sat stunned. The nobles watched in silence. "I choose who stands at my side," she declared. "And if that threatens your pride, perhaps it is your pride, not my decision, that is flawed." The next day, Virelia did something no one expected. She took Elias to the ceremonial observatory. where royal bonds were traditionally announced. A place no one had stood since her mother's own selection, ceremony decades prior, but this wasn't a political binding. There was no kneeling, no oaths, just her voice, quiet but certain. "I've had 1,000 offers," she said, turning to Elias, "but none saw me. None asked who I was beneath the crown." She reached out and took his hand. "I see you," Elias said, his thumb brushing her palm dot, and in that moment no ceremony, no courtly declarations. The bond was made, not one of law or obligation, but of mutual understanding. The palace cameras captured nothing. The guards looked away. But word spread like wildfire. The princess had chosen not a prince, not a warrior, not a genetically optimized heir, but a human man with no title, no backing, and no agenda, just honesty, laughter, and grit. The empire would never be the same again. The moment Princess Virelia took Elias Rook's hand and made her choice known, the galaxy held its breath. What began as scandal now exploded into a crisis. Within hours, 3 of the great houses issued declarations of formal descent. Noble fleets, ancient and bristling with inherited firepower, broke from imperial authority and began regrouping near the outer rim. Even the carefully balanced treaties between the core worlds and outer territories strained under the weight of fury, envy, and fear. "This is not love," one High Lord broadcast across 10 star systems. "This is seduction by a primitive. She has abandoned her duty." "This is treason," said another. From the ice-crusted moons of Ferak to the oceanic spires of Veer Prime, the outcry was the same. A human, an outsider of low birth and no station, now walked beside the most powerful woman in the galaxy. And he hadn't won her through conquest, riches, or title, but simply by being himself. The Arcalian aristocracy couldn't stomach it. They launched smear campaigns. Hollywood's portrayed Elias as manipulative, Earth as a backwater planet raising dangerous men. Rumors spread that he had used pheromone drugs or Terran mind-binding rituals. Every kind of slander was tried, because if what Elias had done was genuine, it threatened the very foundation of how power and worth were measured. Even within the palace, tensions escalated. 2 of Virelia's most trusted ministers resigned in protest. The chief advisor, Lord Kalser, accused her of destabilizing the realm for a fleeting attraction. "I am trying to save this empire from collapse," he hissed in the great chamber. "This is not a love story. This is political suicide." Virelia rose slowly from her throne. Her voice was low, but it cut like a laser through the room. "Then perhaps it's time for a new kind of politics." That same day she convened the Council of Stars for an emergency session. It was meant to be a compromise, a chance to preserve stability. The nobles demanded that Elias be stripped of any symbolic titles, removed from court, and forbidden from further appearances beside her in public. Virelia listened. Then she shattered centuries of tradition. Standing on the dais beneath the galaxy's oldest laws, she made her announcement. "I renounce the old ways." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Her voice remained steady. "I will no longer allow my worth or the fate of this empire to be dictated by bloodlines, alliances, or archaic expectations. The Empire of 10 Suns is not a cage, and I am not a prize." Some shouted in protest. Some wept. But she continued. "If our people are to survive the century ahead through the environmental collapse of Andrus, the rising border wars in the Crimson Drift, and the expansion of the unknown, we must evolve. That evolution begins with me." Then she looked directly at the assembly and said the words that history would record as the start of a new age. "This is Elias Rook. He has no title, no wealth, no genetic perfection, but he sees me not as a symbol, but as a person. And for that, I choose him." What followed was chaos. Several systems declared secession. A few attempted to blockade their own trade routes. The Starborn Order, a powerful political religious alliance, threatened to excommunicate her. One noble house even attempted a coup. Within the palace, smuggling a sabotage crew into the reactor core. It failed, thanks to Elias. Having noticed strange power fluctuations from a diagnostics console in the maintenance wing, he acted without orders. With the help of a few loyal engineers and a palace AI named Rhea, he traced the interference, disarmed the charges, and exposed the traitors. When asked why he did it, Elias replied with a shrug, "She's my partner. That means I protect what? She protects, even if it's an empire." That act, unplanned, unheroic, and completely sincere, won over more hearts than any speech. Soon, something unexpected happened. Worlds long oppressed by noble rule, agricultural moons, forgotten mining, colonies, and frontier stations began pledging loyalty not to the Empire, but to Virelia herself. Not out of duty, but respect. They saw in Elias a reflection of themselves, and nobody who didn't belong, but who made a difference anyway. They called it the Commoner's Bond. A quiet revolution had begun. It wasn't about a throne anymore. It was about who deserved to shape the future. And now, thanks to one human man who never meant to cause any of this, the galaxy was waking up. The Empire of 10 Suns was gone, not in ruins, but transformed. It didn't fall in war nor shatter under rebellion. It evolved, split, reformed, and grew into something new. In its place stood the Free Coalition of Stars, a union of systems that pledged allegiance not to bloodlines, but to shared purpose, to justice, to choice. And at the heart of it all stood Virelia, no longer merely princess nor empress by the old order's standards. She took no throne, bore no ceremonial crown. Instead, she wore a simple band of polished crystal on her wrist, an ancient Terran symbol of commitment, gifted to her by the one person who never asked her for anything, Elias Rook. They had never been formally wed by galactic tradition. The nobles would not have recognized the bond anyway. But under the shade of an old earth oak tree on land scorched by past wars and now reclaimed by peace, they exchanged a promise. It was quiet. No witnesses save a handful of close friends, a reformed AI assistant named Rhea, and a child from a frontier world who once said, "You're the reason my parents didn't starve." Virelia wore no makeup, no gown, no palace armor, just a loose wrap and bare feet. Elias held a simple ring he'd forged from meteorite fragments found near her homeworld. "Virelia," he said, voice low and certain, "you are the brightest storm I've ever walked into. And I never want to walk out." Her eyes shimmered not with tears, but with something deeper, certainty. "I spent my life being chosen, praised, courted, but never seen. Not until you." When she slipped the ring onto his finger, the wind shifted through the trees like the sigh of an old galaxy finally letting go. They didn't need declarations. The galaxy already knew. Years passed. The Free Coalition grew. Systems once chained by hierarchy and noble bloodlines began electing their own governors. Resources were redistributed. Peace treaties held for the first time in living memory, not through force, but trust. And though Virelia still led, she did so without pomp. She traveled from world to world, not in luxury yachts but in public shuttles. She met with farmers and factory workers just as often as diplomats. Her speeches were brief, heartfelt, and filled with a kind of honesty that once seemed impossible from someone born into royalty. She kept her title, not as a claim to power, but as a reminder of what she had once represented and what she had chosen to become instead. Elias remained at her side. He never sat on councils, never gave orders, but his presence was constant, always a half step behind or beside her, ready with a dry remark, a reality check. or a quiet word when she needed. At most, he'd become a symbol in his own right, the mechanic who changed a monarchy, the Terran who saw the person, not the crown, the man who didn't conquer a princess but made her feel free. Their love wasn't a fairy tale. It was stubborn, real, sometimes messy. They argued. They struggled. But they never stopped choosing each other. In her private journals, later published posthumously across dozens of worlds, Varelia wrote, "He never bowed, never begged. He didn't fight for my throne, he just stood still long enough for me to see what mattered. I rejected 1,000 suitors not because I was cruel, but because none of them ever asked who I was beneath the light. Elias did. And when I told him, he listened." Her final entry was short, dated 5 years before her death. "The galaxy no longer demands I be perfect. And he still brings me coffee like it's a ritual that holds the stars in place. This is enough. Finally, I am enough." And in the quiet halls of the rebuilt celestial spire, there is now a statue not of a princess in armor or a queen in glory, but of two figures standing side by side. One, a woman of fire and thought, with her hand gently resting on the other's shoulder. The other, a human in plain clothes, eyes raised not in worship, but in unwavering trust. The plaque reads simply, "She was the galaxy's crown. He made her feel human." And for generations to come, the story is told not as a tale of conquest or royalty, but as the moment a woman rejected 1,000 suitors and found freedom in one honest man.